One person won $315 million in the lottery. 5 years later, he was bankrupt, his wife had left him, and his family was embroiled in serious conflicts over money. This is not an exception. Studies show that 70% of people who suddenly become wealthy lose everything within a few years. Why? Because every new level of wealth obeys its own rules and no one has ever explained them to you. Today, we will walk the path from zero to $100 million, not as a dream, as a risk map. Imagine Tyler. He is 24 years old, lives in a small suburb in Ohio, and his net worth is exactly $0. In fact, if you consider his student loan of $28,000 and his credit card debt, Tyler is in a zone of negative buoyancy. At this level, life is constant deficit management. Every trip to the grocery store turns into a complex mathematical calculation where a $5 error can lead to a cascading effect. A technical overdraft on the card, a $35 fee from the bank, and a subsequent drop in his FICO credit score. For Tyler, a credit score is not just a number. It is his only lever of influence on the future. With a score of 580, he is locked in a cycle of high interest rates. His auto loan at 14% per annum is not just a debt. It is a mechanism that drains his life energy, preventing him from forming even a basic safety cushion. The psychology of this level is survival mode, where the planning horizon is limited to next Friday, and any washing machine breakdown is perceived as a systemic crisis. Do you know what the cruelest part of this trap is? The bank that charged Tyler $35 in overdraft fees made more profit from that than from servicing a client with $1 million account. Poverty literally subsidizes wealth, but there is one action that changes everything, and you are likely putting it off. But what if I told you that the transition from $0 to $10,000 is the most difficult transformational shift you will ever make? This is the moment when not just your balance changes, but your mindset and attitude toward money. This is where the foundation is laid upon which your entire future financial life will be built. When Jessica reaches the $10,000 mark, she first feels what economists call financial friction. She no longer has high-interest debts, and she has opened an HYSA, a high-yield savings account. Currently, at a rate of about 4 to 5%, her $10,000 brings her about $40 a month just for existing. It seems like a trifle, but psychologically it changes everything. Jessica is no longer selling every minute of her time for food. Her money has started working, albeit at minimum speed. And it is at this moment that she has her first experience of money serving her, rather than the other way around. But here is where Jessica makes the mistake that 90% of people make, and which costs them an average of $400,000 by retirement. Not a major catastrophe, not a failed investment. One small psychological reflex, wired into our brains back in the Stone Age. The brain perceives the first savings as a safety signal and immediately demands a reward. A new iPhone, a car upgrade, a slightly better neighborhood. Each of these small expenditures seems deserved, but in the long term, it doesn't just slow growth, it destroys it. Jessica invests $7,000 in a Roth IRA. In 30 years, $53,000, absolutely tax-free. Her neighbor buys an iPhone. In 30 years, photos in an album. The choice is simple, but making it is not. And this is where it is decided who will build capital and who will remain at the level of eternal consumption. But the real game begins when your capital crosses the $100,000 mark. And this is where most people make their main mistake. Ryan has reached his first 100. This is the magic figure Charlie Munger spoke of. The first $100,000 is a standing start, but you have to do it. Why is it so difficult? Because until this mark, your own contribution, your savings from your salary, makes up 90% of your capital growth. The math of accumulation at this stage works against you. But as soon as Ryan steps over this threshold, gravity changes. With an average S&P 500 index return of 10%, his capital begins to generate $10,000 a year. Stop for a second. $10,000 a year. That is more than the minimum monthly wage in most countries of the world. Ryan's money is earning more than a real person and doing it 24/7 without vacations or sick leave. The question is not how Ryan reached 100,000. The question is why most people who get there lose it in the next 3 years. Ryan begins to feel the zone of uncertainty. He has enough money to start taking risks, but not enough to stop working. Psychologically, it is exhausting. He sees how his portfolio can drop by $5,000 in one day due to a market correction. This is a test of resilience. Ryan must now understand asset allocation, how much to keep in growth stocks, how much in bonds, and whether it is worth entering the real estate sector through a REIT. His FICO score is now above 750, which opens access to the cheapest credit resources, allowing him to use leverage to buy a home. But is he ready for the responsibility that this lever imposes? Many get stuck at this level for decades, not realizing that to transition to $1 million, you need to stop being a worker and become an architect of systems. Do you think Brandon's problems will be solved if he has $100 million? I thought so too, until I read a Harvard Business School study that surveyed people with net worths from 100 million to $1 billion. They were asked to rate their level of financial anxiety on a scale of 1 to 10. The average response was 6, the same as people with an average income. At the level of 100 million, money stops being a solution. It becomes a task. And here is what happens to those who don't understand it. Here is the question no one asks out loud. What does a person feel when they first see a figure with 6 zeros on their account? Relief? Euphoria? Most of the people I've studied say the same word: fear. Because $1 million is not the finish line. It is the beginning of a completely different game. A game whose rules no one ever taught you. Ashley has just entered it, and she has no idea that the main threat to her fortune right now is not the market and not inflation. It is one specific tax scenario that annually destroys the wealth of thousands of people at her level. In cities like San Francisco or New York, $1 million is just a ticket to the table, providing basic comfort but not luxury. Inflation at 3% eats away $30,000 of her capital annually. To simply stay in place, she needs to earn more than the average American family spends. Now, her main tools are tax optimization and structural shifts in the portfolio. She uses a backdoor Roth IRA, maximizes 401k contributions, and begins to look at indexed life insurance or annuities. Ashley's psychology changes. She is no longer afraid of losing her job. She is afraid of market volatility. One bad year in the stock market can erase the fruits of her 3 years of labor. She begins to practice the 4% rule, the concept that she can withdraw $40,000 a year without the risk of capital depletion. This is the point of financial independence, but for Ashley, it is only the beginning. And now think about it. If the 4% rule works, and historically it has then for financial independence in the US, you only need $1,250,000, with expenses of $50,000 a year. This is not fantasy. It is mathematics. But why then do 90% of people not reach this figure before 70? The answer is not in income, and not in expenses. Brandon manages a capital of $10 million. At this level, his life looks flawless to an outside observer, but inside are hidden zones of high pressure. The higher the sum, the less room for error, and the more expensive every wrong decision becomes. Brandon can no longer just buy index funds. His capital requires active management and protection. He faces what economists call the excess liquidity problem. Holding $1 million in cash means losing tens of thousands to inflation every month. Brandon begins to invest in private equity, venture funds, and commercial real estate. And each such decision requires not only an analysis of returns, but also a deep understanding of risks, timelines, and deal structures. His social circle changes. At this level, the risk of legal claims and lawsuits arises. Brandon becomes a big target. He needs trusts, protective structures, and professional lawyers. His main task is not to earn another million, but not to lose what he has. His children are growing up in conditions he himself never knew. And this creates a new problem: how to pass on not just money, but values, so that the capital does not destroy their personalities in the very first generation. Here it is no longer enough to just be a successful investor. One must become a strategist, an educator, and an architect of the family's future. Because at this level, failure most often occurs not in finances, but in the transmission of meaning. Michael and Jennifer have reached the summit. Their net worth is $100 million. This is the level of the centimillionaire. At this stage, money completely loses its connection with consumption. You cannot eat more than your stomach allows or live in 10 houses simultaneously. Money becomes pure energy, a tool of influence and legacy. Michael creates a family office, a personal organization that deals exclusively with managing his fortune, taxes, and philanthropy. The cascading effect of his decisions is now measured not in years, but in generations. He faces the estate tax in the US, up to 40% of the amount exceeding a certain threshold. His life is a constant game of chess with the state and market barriers. Psychologically, Michael may feel deep isolation. It is difficult for him to understand who his friends are and who are those seeking profit. He can buy other people's time, but he cannot buy sincerity. The risk at this level is not the loss of money, but the loss of meaning. When any material thing is available at the click of a finger, a person's dopamine system begins to malfunction. Here is a fact that changes the entire perception of money. The richest people on the planet have publicly said that their fortune created more serious personal problems than poverty. This is not a billionaire's complaint. This is neurobiology. The human brain is evolutionarily not equipped to manage assets above a certain threshold because such a thing simply did not exist in nature. And that is exactly why the rule I will talk about next is important at any level. But let's return to reality and ask ourselves, what level is truly the goal? Research shows that the level of happiness and life satisfaction grows with income only up to a certain limit, after which the curve flattens. This limit in the US is often estimated around $75,000 to $100,000 of annual income, which corresponds to a net worth of approximately $1 to $2 million. It is at this stage that you reach the optimal balance between security and freedom without burdening yourself with the complexity of managing massive assets. For Jessica, Ryan, and Ashley, the path to this point lies through understanding simple but deep truths. The first is the power of compound interest, which requires time, not genius. The second is expense control, which is the only factor 100% under your control. The third is investment in one's own human capital, which no one can confiscate or devalue through inflation. The math of wealth is inexorable. If you invest $500 a month at 8% per annum, in 10 years you will have $90,000. In 20 years, $300,000. And in 40 years, $1.5 million. The most interesting thing happens in the last 10 years. Your capital grows more than in all the previous 30 years combined. This is the cascading effect of long-term investing. But the problem is that most people give up in the first 5 years, when growth seems invisible and inflation and taxes seem huge. They are exactly in the phase of accumulating critical mass and they don't know it. Wait a second. Stop and calculate right now. How many years do you have left until retirement? Multiply that number by $500 a month. Now, add 8% per annum. This is your potential fortune if you start today. If you haven't started yet, every month of delay costs you an average of $38,000 by the time you retire. Not per year. Every month. The psychology of wealth also requires readjustment at every level. At the 0 level, you need aggression, a readiness to work hard and take risks. At the 100 to 1,000 level, you need discipline, the ability to deny yourself immediate pleasures for long-term goals. At the million level, you need caution, the understanding that capital preservation is more important than its multiplication. And at the 100 to million level, you need wisdom, the ability to realize that money is only a means to achieve goals that lie beyond the material world. Mark, A successful entrepreneur with a capital of 5 million once noted that the happiest time in his life was the moment he closed his first debt and saw the first $1,000 in his account. Why? Because that was when he first felt control over his destiny. Ultimately, your net worth is not just a number in a banking app. It is a measure of your ability to withstand the chaos and uncertainty of the outside world. It is your shield against market corrections. But remember, this shield can become so heavy that you cannot lift it to protect what is truly important: your time, your health, and your relationships. The market will always be volatile, tax legislation will change, and inflation will try to devalue your efforts. But if you understand the rules of the game at every level, if you are ready for systemic risks and know how to manage your expectations, you can walk this path. The main thing is to remember that wealth is not a destination, but a process of constant learning and adaptation. And in this journey from 0 to 100 million, the most important asset you have is not the money in the account, but your knowledge and your determination to keep moving forward. If this approach to money, mindset, and growth resonates with you, subscribe to the SemInvest channel. Here we break down the real principles of financial growth without illusions or superficial advice.